Dr. Richard Eells house. The thing that's important about the Dr. Eells house is really three things. Number one, it's a historical site. It's a documented site on the Underground Railroad. Number two, it's an architectural site, at least for local architecture. This is the second brick home, and it's the oldest surviving brick home in Quincy, Illinois. And the third thing is Dr. Eells' house. Oh, it's a museum. It's a period museum. So the house was built in 1835, and while the contents are not what Dr. Eells owned, we have both donations as well as reproductions of period pieces inside the house. So it's those three things that make it historically significant and treasured.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to keep on going inside, but I'm going to duck behind.
All right. Well, one of the things that makes this really a unique house, Dr. Eells built the house in 1835, and he was educated as a physician at Yale University, and he moved to Quincy in 1835 and built this house. And originally it was really a 4-room house, and he put a couple additions on it. Dr. Eells was an avid abolitionist. And so, as Laura mentioned, in 1835, 1842, Missouri was a slave state. Illinois was a free state. However, due to the laws at the time, and it was an Illinois law, that even though Illinois is a free slave, if a slave were to escape, he was considered property of the owner, and it was required for Illinoisans to return him. And that was something that just completely was, the abolitionists were aghast. Dr. Eells felt it was repulsive, and he came to Quincy in large part to fight for that cause. So the reason we know so much about this is on a night, August 20th, 1842, Dr. Eells was practicing in Quincy, Illinois. And at that time, there was a slave in Monticello, Missouri, who'd escaped. And, when that happened, two things are set into place. Number one, there was a bounty put on the slave named Charlie. The second thing is, on the Quincy side, there are people, abolitionists who are trying to help runaway slaves. And there was a free black man named Berryman Barnett, and he ended up finding Charlie by the river. And he basically got Charlie to Dr. Eells' house. And if you turn around, Laura, you can kind of see this door, which, there's been a lot of additions, but in 1842, this would have been the door that Charlie would have come to, and he would have knocked on the door looking for help. And at the time, what Dr. Eells said was, hey, you need to get to the carriage house. And, what we can do is get you to the next stop on the Underground Railroad. And in Quincy, for Dr. Eells, what that meant was getting them to the Mission Institute, which is around 25th and Main, 24th and Main, 24th and Prentice. And so in the middle of the night, Charlie and Dr. Eells were in their carriage, and they were going up what is now State Street in Quincy, Illinois. I'm going to kind of take you back to a map here that we have. So Laura, can you see this?
Absolutely.
So this is kind of a map of the period in 1842, and right this is Washington Park, and Dr. Eells' house is right here. You can actually see it on this map. So what would have happened is Dr. Eells would have taken Charlie up into a road and then into the country on what's State Street, and then he cut over what's now 24th Street. And at that time, there was a posse that detected him and started chasing him. A chase ensued. Charlie jumped out of the carriage and ran through what is now which is now Madison Park. Dr. Eells headed home. He got home, and So, he didn't know what happened to Charlie. Well, the next morning there's another knock on the door, and it happened to be the sheriff. Sheriff said, "Hey, Dr. Eells, we're placing you under the arrest for harboring a slave." And while we don't have the exact dialogue, we're pretty sure Dr. Eells denied it, but the sheriff said, "Well, number one, we caught the slave, he implicated you. Number two, you got his wet clothes in your carriage house." And so Dr. Eells was arrested. He ended up going to court, and he was convicted. And the judge of the case was Stephen Douglas, who was the judge. And Stephen Douglas convicted him, fined him $400, which was a lot of money at the time. The case ended up, even though he lost, was appealed to the state Supreme Court. He lost that again, and then ultimately it was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in his U.S. Supreme Court case, this was after Dr. Eells had died, but they went ahead and still appealed the course, but it was Salmon Chase and William Seward were Dr. Eells' attorneys trying to test the law, Illinois' law, on whether Illinoisans had to return harbored slaves. So in 2014, Pat Quinn actually pardoned Dr. Eells, so the story kept moving forward. So that's what makes this a historical site. We don't know what happened to Charlie, and that is one of the things that we're really interested in. We've tried to investigate, but it's been a lot of dead ends. But we know he did get returned to the farm in Monticello, Missouri. So, Laura, any questions?
Yeah, we've got a question. Hannah Simpsons wants to know if Harriet Tubman ever came through the house.
No, we're pretty sure that Harriet Tubman did not come through the house. I mean, we don't have documentation. But one of the interesting things that brings up is what makes this really significant. Well, even though there are lots of houses and lots of people that were obviously part of the Underground Railroad, because it was so secretive at the time, and it was secretive through the Civil War, and it was even secretive after the Civil War, there are so few houses that are truly documented to be part of the Underground Railroad. And at least with the unfortunate conviction of Dr. Eells and, the unfortunate return to slavery of Charlie, that puts this house as a documented site on the Underground Railroad. But that's a really good question. So any others?
Yeah, someone wants to know where the underground part of the house is.
Well, that's really interesting. We've done some, renovations and work to the house to get it it was in really ramshackle conditions, and we made it to kind of a pristine house. So the Underground Railroad is really a term. There's not, there are houses that would hide slaves. We haven't found anything like that in this house. And
so it's not a tunnel system.
It's not a tunnel system. There really isn't a tunnel. There really isn't a railroad. But really what that is I guess, a metaphor for how the people who tried to get slaves to freedom would go from station to station. And the underground was really coined because it was kind of a mystery on how they did it. So on this particular house, we haven't found any evidence that there was a hiding place. We know that in this particular case, Dr. Eells had Charlie in the carriage house. That's where his clothes were, and his old wet clothes. So we know pretty sure that he changed his clothes and got him out. So we don't think he hid Charlie here. But that's a great question.
Is the building behind the house the original carriage house?
Yes. Yeah, that is the original carriage house, and it's in pretty darn good shape. And it's where Charlie would have hung out or hid until Dr. Eells took him in his carriage.
Someone would like to know how many slaves went through the house?
That is one of the great questions, and it's one that is asked. And, as a board and historians who are involved, it's been a topic of immense debate. There's a story, which I'll tell, when David Nelson passed away, who was a great area abolitionist. There's a story that when he passed away, free slaves came and put 200 roses on his on his casket. We don't know. We kind of think, well, the underground movement for certain people was really important. We only know of one case with Dr. Eells, and that's Charlie, and it was unsuccessful. And that's kind of the nature of the secret nature of the Underground Railroad, is we really don't have those facts. And we have some people who like to think of that romantic view that it may have been hundreds, but we have other people who say that really would be impossible at the time, that there really weren't that many slaves in the 1835 to 1842 era who had escaped. So that's a great question. We don't really have an answer. I like the romantic story, but we don't know. We know it was an important part of the Underground Railroad. And it wasn't just Dr. Eells. It was the Mission Institute and many people who were against slavery. There's a lot of people who were indifferent to it, and a lot of people who liked the idea of let the states decide. And so there was a lot of mixed opinion on that. But that's a great question.
We're going to walk around a little bit. I want to show you some of the artifacts here. And some of them are hard to look at. I was here with a group of young students. A lot of them were African American students, and some of these artifacts were hard to look at, but important. These are signed bills of sale for people. I think it's kind of chilling, but makes me proud, at least, to be a Quincyan who was from a town who was trying to help, and from a people who were trying to help end this awful practice. They're asking some questions. We'll go outside in just a little bit and see the carriage house. A couple of people want to see the carriage house. And we'll walk around into the next room, but while we're walking, Adam wants to know how much of the current building is original. Any add-ons here?
Come this way.
We're going to go that way instead.
Yeah, what I'm going to show you before we go through the house, there's a couple architects' renditions.
That's right.
And I think this would be helpful. And I would encourage all of you to come sometime for a tour, because I think you'd like a face-to-face tour even better. In 1842, this was a 4-room house. Strike that. 1835, when Dr. Eells, it was a 4-room house, and you can see this is the 4-room house. It had 2 rooms upstairs and downstairs. This would have been an outside. I'm doing this wrong. You're gonna have to come back.
Oh yeah, 1835 is here.
1835. Sorry, I don't have my glasses. 4-room house, and there was an outdoor fireplace, and so this would have been an outdoor kitchen. And you can kind of see here, this is the outdoor kitchen in 1835. Then in
59.
42. The bottom line is they ended up enclosing that kitchen and adding a room. And so when we go through, you will see between 1835 and 1842, when Dr. Eells was here, this is what, the transformation of the house. So we'll kind of reference some of that as we go through the house. So come on in.
And we'll try to be your steady video guide.
So this would have been, at the time, a living room in 1842 with Dr. Eells, and we haven't moved this stuff back since the open house, so I apologize. But this is a period piece that, of kind of a dining room table that would have been here at the time. We don't really have any artifacts from the period. However, one of the things I think that's kind of cool is this is a whale oil lamp. It's a replica. And you might say, well, gee, what the heck would we be doing with a whale oil lamp in Quincy, Illinois? Well, one of the things in the time, the Mississippi River would have been an immense vehicle of commerce and international trade. So, right now it's the middle of the country. At the time, it was almost the western, front. I mean, it would have been not quite the West Coast, but at least commercially it was the west side of the country.
Right. Sorry, you can keep talking. I'm going to.
So the only other thing you can say, there are some artifacts that we found that we've kind of framed that would have been dated and would have been from the period. So maybe something that Mrs. Jane Eells broke, it might have been thrown away, and we kind of found that when we did our excavation.
So somebody did ask that. Have you done any archaeological surveys on the ground?
We have done some, and I'm not an expert on that, and that's where we
got the broken pottery.
Where we got the broken pottery. However, we've not done a thorough archaeological dig. And I know with Dr. Eells as a physician, maybe there are some artifacts somewhere around that would give us more information about his life, but we've not done extensive architecture. One thing we did do, and we could go back and look at it, I'll just tell you about it, on the door where Charlie would have knocked, there is a walkway, and that would have been the original walkway, and it wasn't brick, it was kind of a stone walkway, so you could see where there was a walkway leading from the carriage house up to that door. So why don't we head on into the kitchen. So this is when it was originally built, the summer kitchen for Dr. Eells, and it's since been closed in. This is a replica. This is not the original, brick. I mean, some of it may be, but it was certainly rebuilt. But this is a kitchen that would have been used by Dr. Eells. I kind of like to look at the
Sorry, gang.
the floor. Are we still on?
Oh yeah. No, I just did a lurchy move there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm new at the videographer thing. Yeah, go ahead with the floor.
Yeah, and so it's kind of interesting. Hey, when you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, you get everything is cut in nice even pieces, but you can see these floorboards are all different sizes. And so, in 1835 when the house was built, this would have been kind of the style of floor without. You can kind of see up here, I was talking about the architectural nature. In 1835, this would have been the end of the house. But as Dr. Eells expanded it, he enclosed this kitchen. And you can see parts of it that even after it was expanded more, but you can see the joists where, and the beams where it would have enclosed the kitchen. A couple cool things that we have as artifacts. We've got 2 chairs that were donated to us by a footman of Abraham Lincoln's.
Oh, wow.
So we think that this likely would have been, it wouldn't have been in the White House, but I think it was a footman when he was in Springfield, Illinois. But it would have been Abe Lincoln's footman, and he donated this. There is, and this is on donation, a slave carriage. So if a slave had a baby, it would be very soon after she had the baby, hey, she had to go out into fields and work. And so this would enable the slave to go back. And I always think that Dr. Eells would have been aghast at having all these artifacts in his house, but it tells kind of a brutal, sad story that I think needs to be told. So that's kind of why we have this here. And there are other artifacts, shackles. And it was kind of common for slaves to have their pictures taken as a family, some bills of sale, and some other, I think slave
tintypes,
Bible, and so forth and so on.
And this is a wallpaper.
Yeah, kind of wallpaper there. So.
From the original house?
Yes, it was.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'll tell you more about that when we go upstairs.
Okay.
So why don't we go in the living room?
Okay.
How much time do we have?
Until people tell me they're tired. We got 60 people watching, so thank you guys all for tuning in to Arts Quincy today. By the way, while we're talking about it, next week we'll be doing on Tuesday another historical site tour of the Villa Catherine, Quincy's very own castle on the bluffs with Miss Holly Kane. Looking forward to that. I've been in there a lot of times and don't know all about it, so that'll be terrific. Let's do living room.
All right, well, this would have been Dr. and Jane Eells' living room. You can see, okay, there's a fireplace. How did they stay warm in the winter? That's one way, with fire, with fireplace. The furnishings are generally period pieces. Not all of them are 1835, but it's in the 1800s that we have all these pieces. This is a beautiful day, and one of the things that much of their lighting, if they wanted a beautiful day, they'd have great lighting. If it was overcast, well, they would use candles and so forth. One of the donations from the Historical Society we got are these two portraits. Again, the Historical Society has told us, no, this isn't Dr. and Jane Eells, or at least we don't think it is. Now, romantically, again, we like to think of this as Dr. Eells and Jane Eells, but in fact, we don't really know who these people are. One of the kind of interesting stories about that is if you look at the kind of portraits that they would have done in the era, at that time, you might have people who do portraits come around. They maybe didn't live in Quincy, but they'd come in, and if you wanted your portrait, you'd go out and have it. And so a lot of times what the portrait people would do is they would pre-make and have people make the background and make suits, and what they do then is paint a portrait of the person's face. And so you can see this portrait was made that way. He had a suit, made a portrait of his face, and if you wanted to pay a little bit more, you could have had a portrait all the way down with your arms. If you wanted a full-length portrait, it would have been even more expensive, but they would have, given a full portrait of your whole body. And that's where the saying comes that it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. So if you wanted to add the arms and the legs, it cost you that. And so that kind of started in this area. So, hey, these are our Dr. Eells and Jane Eells. In our minds, we don't know who they are, but it is part of the story here. Okay. So, any other questions?
Not yet. You guys keep on typing those questions.
Right.
They all liked we got some laugh comments on the cost you an arm and a leg. I like that too. It's one of my favorites.
Why don't we head on upstairs?
All right, I'll follow you. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're getting a couple more people joining us. This is the Dr. Eells Underground Railroad Home, which is normally open on Saturdays, and then some open houses through the year. You can read all about it in Arts Quincy magazine. And touring with Dave Oakley, board member and longtime advocate for the house.
So this room would have been the room that Dr. Eells built for two twin daughters. Dr. Eells and Jane had two girls in Connecticut who both passed away at a young age. When they came to Quincy, they decided to adopt, and they adopted two girls. This room was built, for them. In here we have an old rope bed, and it's kind of cool. You can see, the rope in here, and they would use some kind of straw. So the bedding would be a straw or hay or something like that. And, you'd sleep in this a little bit, and if it got loose, you do that, you had this to take it and to really tighten it up, and you could use this to tighten up your bedding, and, that's the type of bed it is. And again, there's another saying that came from that period, which is sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite. So that would have been another kind of term that came from that. But this is kind of would have been their room, and I don't know. I like the floors. This, great big slats. They really could have had carpeting. We don't know, but probably they would have had rugs in this room. So they got what? As we go in the hallway, there's another story I'll tell you. So this is one of my favorite stories in the house. So, in the 2000s, when the organization bought the house and were renovating it, they did extensive renovation. The house was completely dilapidated. We really had to start from scratch to renovate it. And as they were doing that, they found 3 shoes in the walls, and they later found, what the heck was that all about? And they later learned that for good luck, it was a custom to throw an old shoe in the wall for good luck. And we figured it must work because the shoes are still there, and this is one of them we found. So
That's super cool.
You can see these kind of the lathes here. This is, unlike going to Home Depot, this is what is underneath the walls. They would have had a horsehair plaster they put on this. So I want to come on into my favorite room, which I probably should have opened that.
That's enough. That's good.
Is that enough light?
Yeah.
So this is my favorite room. And the reason I like it the best, this would have been Dr. and Jane Eells' bedroom. You know, you can see this is kind of a period bed, and you know, with more of a mat, and you can see it's got, you know, it's got its blankets and comforters on it. I remember one time a kid asked, "Well, is this a rope bed just like the other one?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really sure." And the kid looked under and said, "Yep, it is. So this is a rope bed just like the other one." The thing that makes this my favorite room, and this is, you know, we don't have any real artifacts from the Eells, but one thing we did find is some wallpaper. So when they did the renovation, we found this wallpaper, and it's just old, and yeah, this was the original wallpaper. We had it analyzed, and through the analysis, you could see that there are actually 9 different subtle colors in this. And so what we ended up doing was having that remade. And so this is the wallpaper. You know, when you look at what Jane and Dr. Eells would have woken up to in a morning like today, it would have been this bright, optimistic color. And to me, while we don't have any artifacts or possessions of the Eells, I look at this and believe that this represents their inner optimism and spirit. And so that kind of makes this my favorite room and favorite part of the story. So with that said, there's, you know, a lot of different people who give these tours, and everybody has a little different part of the tour that they know historically, and the architecture and the history, which I guess is historical as well. But I welcome everybody to come sometime between, you know, on 1 to 4 on Saturdays, May 1st to November this year. We may have a delayed start due to the COVID-19, but appreciate taking the time to learn a little about Quincy history. If you have any questions, I can still answer them, or shoot Laura an email, and we'll try to get them answered that way.
And Arts Quincy will update you on the, you know, the opening when we are able to open this and all of the arts sites in town and arts organizations in town. And just want to give a big thank you to Dave Oakley. Everybody's saying great job, Dave. Dave Oakley and everybody that keeps the Dr. Eells House happening, because it's such an important part of our history. And, you know, as we're looking at this time where we all have to come together and work together to solve a big problem, we got to know that Quincy's been doing that for a long, long time. So somebody's got one more question. Was the plaster redone, or is it drywall now? Kind of both, I believe. I think some of it had to be redone.
Yeah, it was certainly a bunch of it had to be redone. I think it's probably a plaster, but I don't know that for sure. I know originally it would have been horsehair plaster. It could be, I don't think it's drywall, but it's probably a modern plaster.
So I'm going to walk around behind you here. Somebody asked me to see in the inside of this closet, and I haven't been in here either. We got some hat boxes, it looks like. There are a couple of other rooms we didn't really go in. There's another bedroom and I believe a sewing.
Yeah, and those are areas that we don't normally tour.
Right.
They
still being developed.
Yeah, they're just, and there's other areas behind the house that were not, you know, there's more house back there, and they're old, but they're not part of the original Eells house. So.
And we will call it good from here. I'm going to come back in the pretty room here. We'll call it good from here, and you know, to see the rest, you'll have to
come visit.
Come visit. The bed is from is a period bed, so all of the furniture is period. Am I right?
Or replicas, yeah.
Right. So
and when I say period, it's not like all 1842 exact. I mean, we had lots of donations and stuff that would have been from later periods in the 1800s. You know, for example, the footman's chairs, you know, those obviously wouldn't have been 1842, or, you know, but most of it is period pieces.
Hey, Laura, this is the carriage house. It's really in marvelous shape. Charlie would have, you know, come to this spot. Dr. Eells, he would have changed his clothes here. We know that because the wet clothes were out there. And so really, this is just as historic as the house in some respects. One thing I would say that if you come, we do have inside, I think it's a buffalo skin. We don't know what Charlie would have been covered up in, but it kind of represents something that may have been used, or the type of thing to help Charlie stay warm while he was there. So we just welcome everybody to come back. We thank you for your time. This is a site on the Looking for Lincoln. A variety of sites in Quincy, Illinois, and this is one of them. And so, in addition to visiting the Dr. Eells house, I encourage everybody to explore the many historical sites, including the various Looking for Lincoln spots right here in downtown Quincy.
The Looking for Lincoln sites are terrific. There is a map of these. If you're out for a walk, I know a lot of us are taking extra walks right now because it's a nice way to get out of the house. The Looking for Lincoln sites are a nice way to go. Interestingly, they all have these medallions. You can do a rubbing, so you put your paper over the top with a crayon. So if you bring your kids by a Looking for Lincoln site, I highly recommend bringing some extra paper. Kind of think of it like a Lincoln passport, but this one features the Dr. Eells home, so you can see which one you have been to. Dave, if somebody wants to support the home, it takes a lot to keep this up.
Well, absolutely. You bring a great point. It took a lot of funds to buy the house. It took a lot of funds to renovate it. This was a really ramshackle, broken down building that was going to be sold, but we, through lots of help, both private donations, public donations, and foundations, we had great support. But it's an old house. It takes a lot of money, and we don't have any paid staff, but it takes money to replace the roofs. It takes money to paint. It takes money to keep it heated and cooled, and it does take money. We do pay some docents, for their time, but we don't really have a staff. So if you want to support the organization, you can send a check payable to the Friends of Dr. Richard Eells House. That's E-E-L-L-S. Eells. E-E-L-L-S. The Friends of Dr. Richard Eells House. P.O. Box 628, Quincy, Illinois 62306. That's P.O. Box 628, Quincy, Illinois 62306. So, hey, if you can support us, that's marvelous. Otherwise, come by for a tour. If you can't afford that, hey, we give the tours for free. We love donations, but we want people to know this important story. So, hey, we hope you all stay safe, and thank you for joining us this morning.
And hop on to Arts Quincy for all that information. We'll post that donation site right below this video. And again, join us tomorrow. We're doing a Facebook Live. Oh, we're creating our own weather studio tomorrow. So join us for that. So it's a cool kids activity for your whole family. Friday, we're doing a spring activity. And basically Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we will be doing 10 a.m. Art or music tutorials, things that you can do at home. And then every Tuesday we'll bring you a new historical site. So keep tuning in. Arts Quincy will be helping all of our partner organizations get out lots and lots of content as this goes on. And we can't wait to start sharing events with you again too. That's all from Arts Quincy. Thanks so much.